In this video, we are going to look at adding gradients now to our semi-finished city. We have, many of the buildings up there. You still may go back and add more, but now I want to go ahead and put gradients on these things. So if you notice, one thing that I did is I turned off the grid. Reason I did that makes it a little easier to see the coloring of the buildings. You may also notice, kind of like I have here, there might be some alignment issues. The bottom of my buildings don't line up real nice. That we'll address in the next video. For now though, I just want to work on the coloring for these things. It's a little bit of a process, but once you do it once, you'll kind of know how to do it for each building. One of the big things we got to think about with this project is the lighting. Naturally, the lighting in this particular sample is coming from the right-hand side. Reason I know that, I have the lighter side of the buildings on the right-hand sides. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind. My light must be coming from this direction up here, most likely from above because it's a city, so I'm going to assume it's lit by the sun. So it's coming from above and to the right, the light. And that's something I want to kind of keep in my head as I'm doing this. So first thing I want to do is I want to select the building I want to work on. So here's this building over here. I have not put gradient on yet. We're going to work on that one. Now what we're going to do to this, again, always constantly think about the lighting. So what I did on this building, if you notice, it's lighter up top, kind of gets darker as it goes down, and then when it gets behind here, it kind of is like a darker color here as well because now it's shaded by this building here. So I could even spend some more time on this gradient. Maybe I would go lighter, 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 and have it kind of fading a little bit darker as you get down here, but then down here have it fade even like a little bit more. You know what I mean? So you kind of just got to think about where the light's hitting, where the light's not hitting, where the brightest spots are, and kind of use that to your advantage. So anyway, let's go ahead now and do this building. So what I got to do first is I click on the side of the building. What I have to do next, I can't put a gradient on this thing yet. What I need to do is I need to right click on here and go to perspective and choose release with perspective. What this is doing, this will make this thing kind of like, instead of just being a symbol, it's all the little pieces that make this thing up. Otherwise, if I put a gradient on this symbol, if I had this building in another spot, say over here, any gradient that I add over here is going to show up over here and it'll kind of like screw everything up. So that's why we just did, and again, that's a process you have to run through with each of these. You right click, and again, it was perspective, release with perspective. So what you're going to notice when you do that in your layers window is if you notice some of these just say perspective symbol and that's it. Those are just symbols. This one now has the little arrow where we can expand this and see what's inside, and it has a group inside of there, and one of the pieces of that group right here, this is the rectangle that makes up that side. Again, so what I did is I went into my layers and I selected just that one piece of that group that we just created. And now on this one, what I can do is I can add the gradient to this. And as far as colors go for this gradient, I'm going to use my swatches, which I don't see. I'm going to open up my swatches. There it is. And previously I had saved these two colors as the colors for my building. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by dragging in that lighter color to both sides here. Next thing I want to do is I want to make one of these darker, and that will be kind of for my shadow. Now what I want to do is I want to play with kind of where this gradient happens. So I'm going to go to my gradient tool, much like we used to do kind of in previous projects as we were working with gradients, and I probably want to come down on an angle like that and just sort of start playing and figure out kind of what looks right for this thing. So that looks too bright to me, so I'm going to try this thing vertically and just kind of keep trusting my eyes to see what looks right. So that's kind of looking more correct to me. Maybe it does need to go up and down. And again, this building's kind of blocking this, so I'm going to even take this lighter color here and just slightly, I don't want to overdo this, but just slightly kind of darken that up because the whole thing is getting a shadow from that previous building. Now since I did that again, I'm just going to keep playing around here till I feel it looks right. And just trust your eyes on this. That's a little too dark for me because I still want to keep that lighter blue and darker blue kind of color scheme that I have going. I just want to get these shadows right. And again, light's coming from this direction. A lot of shadow created by this. And as I get closer to the ground, less light is hitting this area. So that's kind of why I went with the color that I did. I would do the same thing then on the other side of the building. So I'm going to select the other side. I'm going to right click and do perspective, release with perspective. I go into my layers. Here is that symbol, which now I can expand, and it has a group in here. And again, the bottom one in that group is the building itself. So the rest of these are all windows. So I'm going to go ahead now and select just that one piece. And I'm going to turn that into a gradient. This time, I'm going to use my dark swatches. And again, thinking about lighting, this one, even though it's kind of the dark side of the building, the sun is hitting this a little more directly. There's no other buildings blocking it. So really that darker color at the bottom, I'm, for right now, maybe going to leave that alone and just brighten up that top just a little bit. And honestly, that might be about it for me right now. So you're not seeing like a huge difference there, but as you start putting all this together, it'll become kind of more noticeable, all these little subtle gradients that you're doing. Now you could even choose to go as far as putting, you know, gradients on your windows, or you can kind of leave them solid. What I would do is I'd recommend you do the buildings first, look it over, and kind of decide what needs to happen. So as I do more and more pieces of this thing with gradients, kind of the better this is going to look. Again, constantly thinking about the lighting on this thing. For me, big pieces that would help would be if I did these couple guys here and put gradients on those. Because the other thing that's going to do is that's going to provide a contrast. Now if you notice, I don't have any stroke colors on these. That's going to provide the contrast between this point here and this point here. So you can really kind of see that this and this aren't lined up with each other. It's not one flat surface. But this is kind of closer to us than this. As I add those gradients to that, that'll kind of help. So all of those different things will help kind of get your gradients together. And again, just kind of trust your eyes. Think about where the light's coming from. Just start applying the gradients. You can always kind of change and change and change. And eventually you get it to where you really like it.